Hello and welcome to episode number 94 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends even when you're losing. Today I'm joined by only my friends, Mark and Neelan.
Hey, hello.
We are the tanks.
Triple tanks today.
Red,
tank today.
Green, and
orange. You forgot my tank color?
red, green, and orange.
Wow.
And we are lacking a blue tank. This is my one reprieve from her. My lovely girlfriend, the blue tank. Lovely is one of our first jokes.
That's right.
It is.
Callbacks. Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we are going to be talking about the games we have played this week, as well as our featured topic. The featured topic this week is things that make games more enjoyable when you're losing, whether that's a mechanism, something inherent in the game itself. Just giving you some examples of games that somehow manage to still be fun, even when you're getting got by your friends. Mark, what have you been playing with your friends? Without us, I see a board game here that I've not played, so you couldn't have played this with your friends.
That's true, I guess. I played Sierra West. This is a game I think that came out this year. The thing that's interesting about Sierra West is that it has 4 modules in it, and the modules seem to make the game quite different. There's a lot of cards that are used in this game, and for each module that you use, you're only using a quarter of the cards, so you're getting a substantially different... Well, I should say, I think you're getting a substantially different experience because I've only played the one module so far, but there are aspects of the game that are much different, even in my cursory reading of the rules of the other modules. There are things that are clearly different from module to module. So the module we played is the one that's recommended as the intro module, which is called Apple Hill, I believe. What you're doing in Sierra West in general is you have 3 workers, 3 pawns. One of them starts out at the base of a mountain. The mountain is basically cards that are made into a pyramid to start the game. And the other 2 start on their respective tracks. Each one is on his own track. And what you're doing on your turn, every turn, is you're drawing 3 cards. And it's interesting because the cards have 2 levels of icons. There's like a top row of icons and a bottom row of icons. And you're slotting the 3 cards in your board in such a way to expose or hide some of the icons. So depending on how you slot the cards, you are revealing actions that are available to you or hiding actions that you're not going to be able to get to. And sometimes you're trying to avoid bad actions. So you slot the cards in and it reveals potential actions. And then on your turn, you're moving your workers down the line, down their path, putting them on the actions that you've revealed. So some actions give you resources. Some actions allow you to move your 3rd worker up the mountain. Some actions let you buy cabin cards, which are basically technology cards, which make your further actions stronger. And so there's an interesting thing to consider in terms of how you are moving your guys, because sometimes you want to move one of your workers in such a way to build up resources and then move the other worker to cash in those resources. And it's just very interesting each time to have these 3 cards and try to figure out which icons you want to definitely expose and which ones you might want to hide. Because in addition to the icons at the bottom that give you resources or actions, each card has an icon on the top which allows you to score points or move up tracks that will score you points at the game. So basically, you're moving your 2 workers, you're getting actions and resources from moving the workers, and then once they get to the end of the path, you can move them to the top of these exposed cards to move up these tracks that will give you points and more resources. Also, there is an aspect where when it's not your turn, you can use your workers to piggyback off another player's actions. So you're always engaged in the game, which is always a nice thing to have. So you're always paying attention.
Is this sort of like Seven Wonders Duel in terms of...
It is Seven Wonders Dually in terms of the way that the mountain cards cascade. So what you're doing when you're moving your guy up the mountain is you're trying to get to the top of the mountain and then use another action to take that card from the mountain. And that card goes into either your deck or your discard pile. And that card will give you different actions, but it'll also give you victory points. And there's an exponential scoring the more of these cards that you've acquired off the mountain. So if you acquire 1 card off the mountain, it gives you 1 point. But if you acquire 5, you'll get something like 20 points or something. So you want to acquire those cards.
And what player count did you play this at?
We played at 3. The maximum is 4.
And I'm struggling because nothing sounds immediately like super interesting or intriguing.
Well,
perhaps,
I will say the 3 things I will say that jump out at me as setting this game apart or just like interesting aspects of the game. The first thing is the cards, the multi-use nature of the cards, the fact that you are, you see these cards and you have all these actions on them and you want to figure out which ones you're hiding and which order. Like, I need to place this card and make sure that I have the stone resources visible because I'm playing this card later, which will allow me to use the stone. So like that decision is interesting, and it's something that you don't see in many games. I can't think of many games that have that. The second thing that sets this game apart is, again, the modules. Because, for example, in the Apple Hill module, there is a special resource that is not in the other modules, which is apples. And this is a communal resource. So whenever you put apples into the game, they are a shared commodity. And whenever you take them out, you're depleting everybody's apple. So that's something that is not in any of the other games. So the fact that such a big part of this game is not included in the other games makes me think that each game will have, to some extent, I mean, you always have the mountain, you always have the walk down the path, but in each game, it seems like there'll be one fairly large aspect that is different. And then finally, the last thing that is really good about this game is that, we were setting this game up and, going through the rules, and it seemed like it'd be fairly long. And the box said 45 to 60 minutes, which we thought was going to be ridiculous. We were wondering if that meant per player. And the game ended up being like 45 minutes.
Oh,
it was
great.
Really breezy, real fast. So yeah, those are the three things that jumped out at me. Is
what I like about that, especially at that short play length, is because I'm super intrigued by this idea that the modules substantially change it. Do you have a good idea of what the other modules do, and did you get a sense that they would lead to like radically different games?
I don't think they lead to radically different games,
but something that would feel
right, because the Apple aspect of this game was a big thing, and I looked at the other ones and they seem to be real difference in the game. I don't think this is going to be anybody's favorite game, but it's quick. The replayability is there because of different modules, and it's a good, solid game as well.
Because it's that short, you could theoretically play two games this back to back, change up the modules, and get like two slightly different feels for it, which is interesting.
You would get the one aspect where you're playing the same game twice and sort of improving on it, but also a different flavor.
That's cool.
So I have an opinion, but I want to ask you a little mini hot question, if you will. If you were
hot question.
That's a mini hot question.
I was hoping for like a high squeaky Nealon mini. You used to say, remember when you said all those things in a high pitched voice?
I don't remember that.
If you were to play it right now, your second game without us, what is your first instinct? Replay Apple different Mountain module. Or different module?
100%
And see,
module.
I think that's bad. It's like 4 different flavors of meh.
But the thing is, I will say that this is a game that I want to play a second time with a different module. I can see a lot of games that would have multiple modules that I played the first one and I just don't want to play it again. I don't care what the second module is.
You can see how that would be less interesting to me, perhaps.
Sure.
Like that if you had answered that the one module we played was so interesting with interlocking parts that I'm excited to see it play out in a different way. Where if part of this game's unique aspect is that there's 4 different games in the box.
Right. But like, let's say that you played the game and had a great time playing it, okay? And the game had 4 modules. You're saying your inclination would be to play the same module again first?
I'm saying that replayability as a like defining feature, I think is entirely overrated in the way in which people are currently playing board games.
I don't know if I agree, because I think that if we're saying that the idea is that you're playing a game a limited number of times, right? Would you rather get like 4 semi-unique experiences out of those 4 plays? Let's call it 4 plays just for the sake of argument.
Because no.
Okay.
Like if we're talking about a Euro-ish type game, like my hope would be that there is a inherent depth in the one game that you're playing. Like the novelty of any game makes a first play kind of interesting with some notable really bad exceptions. But if this game is play each module once and it's sort of paper thin and then you don't do it anymore, that to me is worse than just a game that could play 5 times and you could sink your teeth into it.
Okay, interesting.
Like, I don't like modular expansions because I want to know the one way to play a game.
Right.
And this is, instead of committing to something, has 4 modules that change the game enough that it seems perhaps even more cynical and designed for the current market, which is like, you can get 4 plays out of this because each one is different.
Because I feel the exact opposite in some ways, because games where the modules are sort of like pick and choose and add whatever you want, that feels bad to me. I don't like those because I feel like I'm not playing the true way. But this feels like 4 true ways. It could turn out I play the second module and it's bad and it sours me on wanting to play the third module. Like this might be the introductory one because it's the best one. But I feel like I'm playing potentially 4 different games, even though they're going to be like
Largely the same.
largely the same. But I'm more inclined to do that than to play a game that has 4 weird modules and figure out which ones I want to.
Tell you what,
Yeah.
let's solve this. You spend your 4 hours, you play all of them.
Yeah.
And then you come back to Papa Kellen.
Yes.
And you
On your knee.
say,
Sit on your knee.
you say, we're going to play, Grape Ravine.
Yeah, I
the
love that
third
one.
or fourth, after Apple Mountain.
Yeah.
After,
Peach Hill.
and Banana Split.
Yeah.
And so I'll just play the best one.
Okay.
And then, we can kind of skip that and I'll save 3 hours of my time and you'll use 4.
Perfect.
Well, you use 5 because you'll have to play.
Well, I will.
Grape.
I will not
Ravine.
play Grape Hill with you. Or what was it?
Ravine?
Grape Ravine.
What do you- Grape Ravine,
Sorry,
dude.
I was thinking so much about it. I love Apple Hill so much that I just had it stuck in my.
Well, you
brain.
don't love Apple Hill because you already said that you'd choose the unknown Banana Split
No,
over
'cause
Apple Hill.
The greatness of Apple Hill propels me to Banana Split,
All right.
and that was Sierra West.
A game that I purchased. A game that I purchased that's quite expensive from Target, an incredible store. I really
We're
did.
not allowed to say that
No,
anymore.
but I really did purchase this from Target because it was on a smashing sale. Was Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Mansions of Madness is a big box FFG game that Mark has on his top 50 games of all time list, somewhere in the 20s.
I just looked it up. It's 29 on the BGG list.
Top 100 games of all time. Mansions of Madness is a Cthulhu game with Mr. Cthulhu and all of his friends in it, where there is a series of missions, and it's a very app-assisted game. There are expansions that you can buy that add new missions. There are DLC missions, literal missions that use the base components, but you must pay extra in the app to unlock them, which is abhorrent, so let's start there. Mansions of Madness is if you've played a game with Cthulhu, you kind of understand what you're doing. It is a Ameritrashy game where you're running around a mansion in the mission that I played, doing skill checks, trying to figure out what your goal is, looking for clues. I don't want to spoil too much of this intro scenario. It's called Cycles of Eternity. And then you must escape the mansion. What makes the game potentially interesting is that if someone goes insane, you sort of have 2 health trackers. You have the health tracker that is your damage, and then your health tracker that is your insanity. This sounds like every other Mr. Cthulhu game that has come before it. And if you get enough insanity, if you get enough horror, you go insane, which could change your victory condition. Your victory condition could change to try to burn down the mansion. Instead of being a cooperative experience, it could be try to murder another player. It could be try to collect a bunch of items. So if one player starts behaving in an errant way, you kind of all turn and look at them and go, what's going on, man? But most of the actions that you're taking on your turn are clicking on something in the app and then doing a skill check using one of your 5 different statistics and then rolling a bunch of dice and hoping you hit. I don't know what I thought I was getting into, Mark, based on your love of this.
Yeah.
I thought I was getting into a good game. Let's start there.
Okay.
Almost every action you take in the game is a skill check,
Yeah.
right? Which is rolling a bunch of dice. There isn't really an inherent mystery or scariness. I chose to play this because it's October. We're coming up on Halloween. This episode is releasing on Halloween. Happy Halloween. But don't play Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. What do you like about this?
So I've played it, I think 3 or 4 times, and each time I've played it, it's just been a very rollicking game. They've come down, I think in every instance, to a crescendo. I mentioned the story before, but we've had players in the final turn where we thought that the good guys had won. A player stabs another player and kills them to win the game. At the very end, we had one situation where a player went insane and was trying to burn the place down as the other players are trying to win the game. There's been a lot of just screaming at the table and I only have 2 dice and they have to both hit and it's never going to happen. And then it happens and everybody cheers.
So I think that I can see our game crescendoed at the wrong time, a little too late, where I can see if that had happened 2 turns earlier, there would have been a great 25-minute moment out of, a 2.5-hour game.
Right.
So I totally hear you where someone could be bad and why are you doing that on your action? And, we had a little bit of that right at the end, but we only needed one more half turn for the good players to win. So it really didn't come up.
Right.
But what I will say is that I'm confused as to how you love Blood on the Clock Tower.
I don't love Blood.
Oh, sorry.
To be clear, I do
how
not.
you do not love Blood on the Clock Tower, but like this because the app is adjusting and crescendoing the game intentionally. So it has all the statistics, right? You don't even know what you need to roll on the dice. You just enter in stuff, and then it's around with the back end to try to have you have an optimal experience.
Are you sure that's true?
Well, it's taking the place of a Dungeon Master, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I never thought that it's fudging with the numbers in the back. But that's actually not even a big deal to me that much in this case, because this is a mostly co-op game. And also I know what I'm getting into. I'm getting into a game where we're rolling dice and going crazy, and somebody's going to go insane maybe, and somebody's not going to go insane. This is the game that we're all signing up for, which is one of the qualms I have with Blow in the Clock Tower.
I can't help but think about our recent episode about games that are better experiences than they are mechanically, because I don't know too much about Mansions of Madness specifically, but a lot of what it sounds like puts me in mind of something like Betrayal in the House of the Hill, right? Which is a game that is a better experience if it goes right than the frankly boring mechanics. I don't know if that's a large part of what elevates the experience of Mansions of Madness.
So yeah, that feels like a very good way to describe it. I feel like Mansions of Madness Second Edition is like just about the best version of Betrayal in the House of the Hill you could have. Like the app integration is fantastic. It's just, again, I've already said this a number of times, but I find it so intuitive and cuts down on a lot of the bookkeeping. And whereas Betrayal can be broken a lot, Mansions has I've never had that feeling like where we had like the amp squib of a experience.
It feels like it's a little bit more constructed to not go off the rails as frequently, perhaps.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You don't have the like very weird edge cases like you have in Betrayal where it's like, the haunt happened and
now it's clearly something's just won.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I honestly am interested in doing one more mission 80% because you say it's good.
Sure.
And not because of the, 3 hours I spent learning. It's very sprawling. There's a ton of components. In my first game, there was a ton of downtime as the app tells you which tile to bring out, and then you have to search through like 50 tiles front and back to find the matching tile and place it. And then you have to mirror what's on the app in terms of all the tokens and pieces that are on that. You have to then find those tokens and pieces, put them out on the board. Then it's telling you to search through an alphabetized deck of cards to find, you're finding specific cards, you're finding specific people, and you're literally recreating what's already on the app screen on the physical. It felt entirely redundant.
That never felt that laborious. I mean, maybe because the way that we had it set up, we had the cards alphabetized, and then the tokens were just sitting there. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of downtime, but that never felt like a barrier in our games.
Were you sort of taking on the burden of like doing a lot of the manual bookkeeping?
Yes.
Okay.
I was.
Because
and the app does help. Without the app, like there is Mansions of Madness First Edition, which I wouldn't even want to get anywhere near.
I agree. I would not play this game without the app.
I just didn't realize that your tolerance for that level of just like the story is bad, right?
Yeah, I don't remember thinking the story was like took my breath away. But
like a lot of what you're doing is reading the shelf creaked, and then you look to the stars, and like then it's like do a skill check of 3 lore, and then you roll your 3 lore dice, and then the app is like you looked and saw that something was significant, but you didn't have enough lore to know.
God, I got shivers just now.
But like that, you're having fun right now?
What I'll say is like the story worked insofar as we had one game where there was a mob, and just seeing the mob move around was something we were joking about and like saying like, oh, they're coming, whatever. And then we had one where we were all escaping to a certain place, and the running out there was something we were all doing and talking about. And it was like a clear goal on the board. Like we got to get there. Again, just to reiterate, like this is a game where I go into it for the experience and
drunk.
And I know that this is what it is. Like this is a experiential game. This is a game that you play for the rolling.
So then my final question is, would you actually, your favorite 3 people to play games with is me.
I'm not here.
Primarily.
Not at this table.
Neelan, and then Christina.
Sure.
No, but we're not the best 4 to play this. Like you're putting together your dream team for Mansions of Madness, where you could read those lore clues to each other. No, I'm serious. Would it would actually be us? Because I might pick my dumber friends.
I will honestly
I'm not joking.
You might pick your dumber. I will say that I would definitely have Christina and Neil in there. Because
perfect.
That's right. So we're playing the 3 players. No. I will say that of the 3, I can see you liking it the least, but I just have a hard time seeing us 4 playing the game and you not having a good time. I just don't understand. If we just go in understanding this is going to be like silly and like people are going to be losing limbs so they can't carry things, or like potentially going crazy, and we're like playing it up at the table. I just think it'd be fun.
Cool. Let's do it. That is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, one of Mark's favorite board games of all time.
And I stand by it.
So for this very special Halloween episode, we're going to go from the Mansions of Madness to the place where no one can hear you scream. We're going to space. Thematic. We're talking about Black Angel. This was a game that was voted on by our Patreon as the game that they most wanted us to play. This is a poll that we're going to be conducting on our Patreon every few months where we ask you to tell us a game that you most want to hear about us talking about.
And whatever you pick, we will play. We're
play.
bound. That's a legal document.
100%. Black Angel was voted to the top of the polls, and we have now played Black Angel.
Who'd you make buy Black Angel? Did you use the sweet patron dollars, or did we use Kellen's bank account?
Kellen Allen. We use Kellen Allen.
Yeah, that's true.
I hope so.
He's a very wealthy man.
Black Angel is by Pearl Games. It has beautiful art by up-and-comer Ian O'Toole and 3 designers whose names I'm about to butcher. Sébastien Dujardin, Xavier Georges, and Alain Orban, I'm going to say. So these are the 3 designers that designed Trois, which I believe this game has been very heavily compared to, shares a lot of mechanics. I have not played Trois, so the two of you have played this, so this is going to be an interesting, very different experience for me than it was for the 2 of you, I assume. Okay. Black Angel, at its simplest, is a dice drafting game. So you have a pool of dice, which is populated based on workers you put out to the 3 main colors of dice. So there's green, blue, and yellow sections of the board, each with 2 main actions on them. Every so often, you're going to be rolling dice to populate your pool. And then when you take a turn, you're going to either be picking one of your dice for its value or buying a die from someone else's pool. The dice only go from 0 to 3, so they're slightly weighted dice. And that value represents how many times or how powerful the action that you're taking is. So if I use one of my yellow dice with a 3 on it, I take one of the yellow actions, I can then say move 3 times or pull 3 cubes from the board. So that's the basic system. And then a large part of what happens is either moving ships on this separate board where the Black Angel is moving through space. You're going to be putting out mission cards, which are either worker spots where you can get more actions, or rewards when these cards slip off the board. That system's pretty involved. I don't think it's worth spending too much time on that. Other things that happen are cards, which are called Ravager cards, will come out in sort of damage sections of the ship. You'll also get damage cubes that go out. So there are actions that are both to retrieve these Ravager cards, clean up debris cubes from the ship, which you can then use to power more bonuses. Debris cubes go onto this tech board you have. This is a 3x3 grid of sort of bonuses that you can activate with either by playing cards or debris cubes as part of your action. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of systems here, but what is quite interesting is how closely connected all of them are. So you might have a bonus action that triggers a movement on the space board. By placing a mission card out, this is going to cause more tech tiles to come out. Buying those tech tiles is going to give you more bonuses that you can use in your turn. Playing cards is going to give you more bonuses. This is all in service of finding good, efficient ways to use the resources you have to get victory points. The game has a variable clock on it where, depending on when the ship hits the home planet, I guess, presumably called Spez, that is when the game will end. Or if
near Cobol.
Yes, right. Or when enough Ravager cards come out, the game ends and slightly alters the end scoring. I think that's a good, decent enough summary of the basic systems of Black Angel. I had a good time with this. It's a game that sort of speaks to a lot of the things I like about these sort of very Euro puzzly games. I was very intrigued by sort of building up a good tech board, finding good ways to sort of combo debris and cards in order to generate points. It's interesting because I also think that a lot of the mechanics I possibly might have curbed from it, which makes me very interested to try Trois now, because I believe Trois is a much simpler version of the same game. Is that right?
I'd say it's more streamlined for sure. It's definitely less fiddly.
Yeah, there's less subsystems going on, but I think you might have the ability to break, and this is hard after first play, I think the ability to break Trois and get some crazy combos feels a little more pronounced.
Interesting.
One of the things that I love about Trois is the comboing of the different cards and abilities. In Black Angel, when the similar system, it allows you to play mission cards out onto into space. But unfortunately, Black Angel is running away from your mission cards. And so there's actually a time limit to where those mission cards will fall off the board. So if you want to plant a cool combo card out there, well, you're only going to have maybe 5 or 6 turns before that combo card is not on the board anymore. So you have to have a better understanding of what your future turns are going to be in Black Angel, to the point that it was like kind of arduous to sit there and think about it. All of the systems are so interconnected that it's very hard to wrap your head around, especially on a first play.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as the space-board was concerned, there were a lot of things that I liked about it because, as you say, like if you want to play a card, if you want to have an action space out there for a while, you would place it in such a position where it's not going to drop off the board for a long time. So
you zoom out with your ship,
right,
past the Black Angel ship all the way to the far reaches of the galaxy,
yeah.
And then you play a mission card up there. Versus if you want them to get left behind, you can do that too, because you score some points if your mission card gets ejected.
Right. So
yeah.
I found that to be sort of interesting because there were some cards that I could see wanting to play and have it sit there and have access to it for a while. But there were also times where you wanted cards to drop off the end of the space board because those cards are then tucked into your board and they become a way to multiply end of game points. So I just thought that was an interesting consideration in terms of where you wanted to place these. And the timing was a very important factor as well, because I had cards that getting them to combo meant that I had to place these mission cards in a very specific way that I sort of enjoyed. I enjoyed like that secondary level of where are you going to place the mission cards in addition to which cards you're going to place.
Yeah, so I glossed over this a little bit, but it's worth talking about the way the board works. And it's kind of like this treadmill, so that as the ship's moving forward, which happens every so often, tiles come off the back and move to the front. So you can do a lot of just tucking these cards, like you're saying, by sort of sending your ship out backwards behind the ship, which, to be fair, I was not doing a lot of in my game. I sort of glossed over the spaceport a little bit, but used to sort of, I would say, tremendous effect by getting a ton of cards tucked.
And it's interesting that we were sort of, like, I was playing with both eyes basically on the spaceport, and to hear that you were like, just sort of like have it on the side. But I mean, we were close in score, so it's interesting that you don't have to focus on one.
Yeah, I was just looking for key moments for like specific missions and specific big points grabs, but I wasn't that.
Whereas like a lot of times I was just like, I wouldn't even care what the mission was. I was just looking at dump cards, because I wanted to tuck a lot of them.
Yeah, I think this spaceship thing is taken from another game they worked on together called Solenia, which is a much lighter game. But it does feel like there are two almost, in my opinion, almost enough systems for two separate games that are grafted together, where Trois is a lot more focused, I would say is a good word to use. Trois also feels a lot more punishing. In Trois, one of the worst things ever is you roll your dice and you see how powerful your red dice are, and you just know you're not going to get to use it. You know, having your dice bought from you in Trois feels horrifying, even though you're getting paid for it. Here, there were specific moments near the end of the game where it's like, okay, no, I have to have that thing. But other than that, I never felt too inconvenienced by someone buying my thing. I also had the resources to buy their dice every single turn, or almost every single turn if I wanted to. Mm-hmm. So it became more incidental than that harsh moment in Trois.
Yeah, the glut of resources was one takeaway for me. And again, it could have been, because of our first play, but I never felt like I was out of the three sort of one-time use resources. They were sort of there wherever I needed it. And yeah, there's a lot of ways to mitigate or protect your dice, because every time you roll them, unlike Trois, you can secure one. You can always protect one. And there are other ways to protect even more.
Yeah, I think with a game this complicated, honestly, and it's not there's that many rules that they're so interlinked together, and I think the rule book is not great. I would recommend you watch a video. This is one of the only games in recent memory in the last couple of years that I've had to watch a video to even get my head around it. I think it would be great to play Trois soon, Neelan, so that you can see what that's like.
Yeah, to compare them in close proximity for sure.
Yeah, it's hard. Black Angel is so much prettier.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because it's quite a striking art style, right?
Yeah, it's neon saturated purples and blues, to the point that some people on the internet are mad because space is supposed to be black, It's like when you're watching one of those sci-fi films and someone's like, there's no sound in space. Like, don't you dare enjoy those gunshots in Ad Astra. Mm-hmm. I think that it's gorgeous. I think there are a couple things that are hard. Some of the colors.
You didn't like the lush gray and the very striking orange of the gray and orange cards?
Yeah, they're not gray or orange,
They're
right?
not gray
They're
or-
blue.
and yellow. Yeah.
And there's a green-blue color blindness for me that's a little bit hard in some of it. And then the asteroids in space you kind of can't see because it's so like pink looking. And Neelan got by that.
Yeah, I was
He
like,
couldn't
I'm
even
going to move
see.
here. Meanwhile, there's an asteroid belt like, right in my way.
Can you not see the asteroid belt, Neelan? And the answer is no, he couldn't. Thank you, up-and-comer Ian O'Toole. Though I did lose this game quite drastically. It's also worth noting that we did use a timer to try to speed up the length of this first play. We were worried about it taking over 3 hours because we are all tryhards. And on the heels of our recent discussion, we did use a timer to count up. No penalty for having too much time, but it did definitely speed up the game. And we may talk about that on a future episode.
I think that's about covers it for Black Angel. That is by Pearl Games.
So, as we always do, we will now read a review of the podcast. This review comes to us from Canada Carl, a must-listen every week, and every is in all caps so that you know he is serious. Regardless of the topic, these 2.5 guys do a phenomenal job of providing insight and knowledge while never failing to deliver several laugh-out-loud moments per episode. Do we know who the 2.5
Yeah, well,
is?
Mark and I were like, definitely, we're the two.
Yeah, we're the two.
What
So
is it,
that
like
makes you
2.5
the
men? That's a garbage show to be referencing, Canada Carl. Their diverse preferences in games make for great discussions, and the fact that they playfully clobber each other's weak spots generates a real connection that you somehow feel a part of their banter. I've yet to find another board game podcast that nails the interpersonal jabbing like these guys do, the only podcast that gets listened to the same day of release.
Thanks,
Very
Canada
kind.
Carl.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't think it's self-evident that he's referencing me
I
as
think-
half a man.
I think because you have the Callan Allen alter ego, so it's like you either have half of a Callan Allen or a half of a Killen.
I'm sort of the only one that's proved that I have a girlfriend.
Okay.
So how does that factor into this
I
discussion?
don't think it factors in at all, really.
Well, who could say? Thank you so much for that review. We did just want to say that the best thing that you can do for the podcast is to spread the word, whether that's online or with your board game friends. Anywhere you can share that you listen to the Board Game Barrage podcast is really, really helpful for us. Growing the podcast is something that we've done in 2019 and something we hope to continue to do in 2020. Any way that you can spread the word would be greatly appreciated, including leaving 5-star reviews. Maybe I'm 1.5 of the men, and like Mark's just not even one of them. You know what I mean? Like,
That's one way to think about it.
so the featured topic this week is going to be talking about games that are still fun when you're losing and the mechanisms and what is involved in having that experience. I think we all know what it feels like to be losing a game and to not be having any fun. So why don't we start, as we always do, with our opening statements? Neelan, what is your opening statement? Yeah, we always do this.
May it please the jury.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've prepped an opening statement.
Judge Kellen, say it. You may not approach the bench, good sir.
I think this is the ballpark of this topic is games where the experience of playing them, like the fun things that happen moment to moment during the game, are somewhat more important than the end condition, right? Like at some point, the competition of it is not secondary, because I think as long as we all agree that competition should always be the foremost thing in all of our minds, at every point in time.
I don't know that everyone will agree with us.
No,
on
I
that,
know. Most people don't seem to, actually.
But us here,
but for us at least.
we're holding hands right
Yeah.
now.
But there are
Three-way
still
handshake.
Exactly, little circle. As long as we sort of agree with that, then there are still aspects of some games that just like heighten the experience of playing them, so that even when you're losing, you're still having a fun time.
Even when you're losing, you're still winning.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you watch?
Well, this is the most how to have fun with your friends even when you're losing episode we've ever done. In fact,
Just go watch Barney. You try hard. No,
I didn't
try
come
hard.
up with the slogan.
Oh, yeah, you came up with the other slogan that's
Wait, what is the
equally
slogan?
bad. The thing that your friends like
That's
that
not
you
a
talk about.
slogan.
Then what is it?
I was just rambling because we
Yeah, and why
we had
not
an
a
empty
Mark?
page.
That one. I like
See,
that.
Mark likes that.
We already established that I have 1.5 out of 2.5
Did we
votes.
establish that? I feel
Yes.
like you established that.
Canada
erroneously.
Carl told us.
Canada Carl, clarify who the 0.5 is and tell Kellen why it's him.
Please don't do that publicly. Please send that to boardgamebarrage@gmail.com so that we can accurately convey your thoughts and feelings, Canada Carl. Mark.
Yes. I'll just say that this is just generally a tough thing for me, just because the competition is a large part of the enjoyment for most games for me. So if I'm not in the running at all, I do have a hard time enjoying myself. So,
I do remember that game of Tapestry.
well, we're talking about games here.
Oh,
Everyone remembers, because it's Blood on the Clock Tower, it's Tapestry.
Yeah.
If Mark doesn't like it, he lost at it.
Speak truth to power, as I always have and as I always will.
So let's get specific, right? Because I do think that games can design systems that help even when you're losing, right?
Yeah.
So a specific type of mechanism is not knowing if you're winning or losing the game. So this feels self-evident, but there are games that do victory point scoring as you go, where it's really clear that you're neck and neck. There's games where all of the scoring happens at the end of the game. A couple of examples that spring to mind. QE is a game where you could be losing the entire game just by your sheer idiocy and not even know it, because the game kicks out the player who has spent the most money. Another game that has a similar system is Ponzi Scheme, similar but different. In Ponzi Scheme, the player who goes bankrupt first cannot win the game. But it's not self-evident to you. Your relative position within the game is completely obfuscated for you, and that makes the game fun until the end.
And that's one of the reasons that I'm going to throw it in here now. If there's one thing that I love the most about Biblios, it's that last bit where you're revealing how many points you have of each color, and the moments where you don't realize that you either have won a color that you thought you had no chance in, or just lost a color that you thought you had no chance in, and that you could have turned it around if you'd played one card differently. I just love that. And Cerule saw this for himself when we all played a game of Biblios together at Shucks. And I'll also say that when you mention that, what jumps to mind is a way that Black Angel is different than Trois, because Trois, the scoring is much more obfuscated, which I enjoy about Trois. Like, you know, one of the ways that you're going to be scoring endgame points, but you only have one part of that information. And Black Angel, it's much more apparent how everybody's scoring. In fact, I think for the most part, you could figure out everybody's score if you wanted to pour over the board state in Black Angel, whereas with Trois, you cannot do that, which is something I like about it.
I'm curious if, like, in your mind, Kellen, like, is this a indictment of, like, victory point tracks in general, like, of the idea that you're seeing throughout the game, your position?
Well, I think, like, in Black Angel, we sometimes don't know on a first or second play how much of your scoring is going to be endgame victory conditions versus scoring as you go. Ticket to Ride is an example of an interesting one where you're not supposed to score the game until the end of the game, I believe, according to the rules, but you can score it as you go. Mm-hmm. Or that might be vice versa. Strike that, reverse it. Another quote from the immortal Gene Wilder. So according to the rules of Ticket to Ride, you actually score points as you go, but many people play that you only score points at the very end of the game just because all of the points are evident on the board. And that would change your strategy depending on which way you choose to score Ticket to Ride. I don't think it's an indictment of victory points. I think that one interesting way that a game can make losing fun is just by not telling you that you're losing until the very last moment.
For sure.
And I think that the feeling of winning, like, Mark takes a great pleasure in beating me in a game.
Yes, I do.
But I think when you lose to me, I don't think that pain is equivalent to the joy that you feel when you beat me.
The pain is worse.
What? That doesn't help my point.
Don't know what to tell you.
The pain is worse?
Pain is always worse.
Like, how could I lose to that yuck buck?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that.
That half a man?
Then 1.5 times, man.
What I'm saying is that a lot of times at the end of the game, it just feels like, oh, I lost. Like, the losing is not, it's not about actually losing the game. It's about feeling powerless in a game.
Right.
It's about being 3/4 of the way through the game and going, there's nothing I can do.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet I'm going to be sitting here for an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
In a losing position, just kind of like playing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well said.
So I have one that's pretty specific to me, I think, and is true of a lot of scenario-based cooperative games, where the idea is if you were to fail the scenario, you would have to be forced to repeat it. So Aeon's End is my sort of go-to example for this. And the reason I think it's so striking in Aeon's End, because what that game tries to do is replicate the feeling of, like, boss battles in video games, specifically almost like raids in an MMO. A lot of your first couple of games against a specific nemesis is losing. You know, the nemesis steps in, raises Gravehold to the ground, and you sort of have to, like, suffer that loss, but you've learned something along the way. You've learned how its systems work, how it's going to defeat you, and how you sort of then have to counter it in a subsequent game. I believe that the game is designed to be lost a couple of times so that you can learn the strategy for defeating it. And I think that works because it's a lesson in learning the systems more than just, oh man, we lost, that sucks. You then immediately finish that game and are like, I know exactly what we're going to do differently next time.
But how does this factor in when you're playing time stories, man? Because that is also the exact same system, except...
I think it's less successful in time stories, that's for sure, because I never felt great when we lost a game of time stories, but that is definitely built into the design of that you would have to learn as you repeat the cycle, as it were.
This feels like from an outsider, such like a video game player's thing to enjoy. I mean, totally. That's not to say that it's bad. Somebody saying that as an aspect just feels like an itch that you'd get scratched in video games.
Totally, because I think very specifically, like the idea of beating a boss and being like,
learning,
this is going to take 5-6 attempts, but you're feeling yourself getting better every single time. Like,
and the idea that like you're having the same encounter twice, and the only thing that makes it so much easier the last time than it was the first time is purely your skill,
is knowledge.
You know how to beat this guy.
But is that true for every cooperative game? Because
I don't think so. It's true for a lot of like I said, like scenario, like Gloomhaven is theoretically similar. You lose less scenarios in a game of Gloomhaven, but the ones that you do, you're like, man, what are we going to do differently that would help us win?
So in a game of Ghost Stories, have you played this?
I have, but only once.
It's an extremely hard cooperative game that's being re-released, I believe, as The Last Bastion with a different theme. That game is not scenario-based.
Right, and the reason I call out scenario specifically is because I think in a game like Ghost Stories, there is so much variance to the setup that you can't really reapply a learned strategy in order to beat it. I wouldn't think.
So what is the desired win rate in a co-op game?
For me personally, because I assume that's pretty...
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say 25% of the time.
And so are the other 3 times still fun?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me personally, yeah.
So it seems more broadly applicable than just scenario, like
sure,
based on that answer.
Sure,
yeah, I feel like a game like Pandemic is a game where you can get better at it, but it's not the same sort of getting better at it that you get in a scenario-based game. Because like you and your friends can get really good at Pandemic and up your win rate, but at least the way I'm understanding Nealon's, like when you learned a monster in Aeon's End, you're going to more or less crush it because your skill is honed to such an edge that your skill improvement really shows in a game like that.
Right. And to the extent that I think that if someone knew the strategy, it would be a lesser game. And that's the reason Aeon's End works is because it just throws 10 of these things at you in a box of it. So it's designed to have you progress to the next one and reset your skill, basically.
It's like the video game thing. Like if you knew how to beat every boss in, I don't know, I'm speaking out of ignorance. In a lot of games, I feel like if you knew how to beat every boss the right way and you're playing it for the first time, but you'd read the strategy guide, you would be quite successful. You know?
Absolutely.
It's funny. I've never liked boss battles in video games.
Oh, interesting. They're one of my favorite parts. Like,
it's just like there's like 5 systems that you don't know when you start, and then you get caught over and over again. Yeah. Until you learn how to evade.
But then you're like, next time I'm going to do this better. And then you see yourself getting better because you have this giant life bar that you're chipping away at. And then you get better and better and closer, and it's so good when you finally get over that hurdle.
Nope. I think one of the things that we have ignored because it's so obvious is like engine builders or tableau builders, games that allow you to create something. It doesn't matter if another player is lapped you on the score track. If you make a cool combo that's fun, it's okay to be losing. Kind of. I mean, it is, Mark. You're shaking your head.
I feel no joy listening to that. Like, I never look back. I understand it and I get it. On an intellectual level, I get it. But I have never once personally stepped back from my board and said, oh, look at this great city I built, but I finished last place. Like, wow.
Yeah, because I think that's the disconnect for me as well. Because all I can think of at the end of like that fabulous construction is like, well, I thought this was good, but clearly it wasn't.
It's garbage.
Yeah.
So, like, Agricola is an easy example for me, right? Because there's both the combos that you make with the minor occupations, but there's also just my pigs multiplied, and seeing your farm be physically built, or the satisfaction of placing a building or placing a enclosure in the exact right spot can be enjoyable even with your losing.
Sure, I get that. Yeah.
There is that element of, like, sheepishness, no pun intended, where that your sucks, but like it's still cool.
Hey guys, I got a sheep.
Well, and
no, I get it. I'm sorry, but that was funny. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and I've heard a lot of people say this about a game like Terraforming Mars, where, this game has a ton of different cards that do a ton of different things, and, if the cards can fall in such a way where you're building these incredible engine where one thing's firing off and a lot of things are jutting out of your engine as a result of this incredible system that you built. So yeah, I get that. I get that you can have, even if you end up losing, have this enjoyable mechanism or engine that you've built.
That does make sense for that specific game, even because my one memory of my one play of Terraforming Mars was I had this fantastic heat engine that I was very proud of that lost me the game.
Sure. Yeah.
But you had a lot of heat.
Yeah. This is all that matters.
No one can take that away from your people,
Exactly.
Neelan, that were on Mars. You're on Mars, right? You're there?
You're
Yeah,
Terraforming Mars to go on there.
Yeah, I'm still off looking for Spez while you idiots are stuck on Mars. Actually, I think humanity is like dead and dying in Black Angel.
Oh, no.
But I did read the lore.
He did. Well, I include this as a at the
Patreon.
end
Patreon
exclusive, yeah.
is me reading the lore for Black Angel.
That's right.
I thought that it would help Neelan and I perhaps win the game, but Mark,
we do the rich backstory.
yeah, Mark showed up and somehow still destroyed us. Another specific example of a mechanism or a type of mechanism that makes losing more fun, and this is actually probably my best example, is games where when you're losing, the actions that you have to take get riskier and riskier. I love this in a board game because it's sort of like throw caution to the wind,
right.
YOLO time. So great examples of this are games like Skull, where you're like down to your last chip and you have no choice but to like bet big and just try, like you have to bet all of them. You have to bet, there's 6 players and you go, I can find 6 roses, even though that's very, very unlikely to do. Games like Lords of Vegas. Lords of Vegas is a really fun semi-negotiation game where you literally bet at each other's casinos, but the edge is against you. So if I know that Mark has all the money, he has all the infrastructure, it's time to go to Mark's casino and just desperately hope.
Yeah.
And those moments can't stop is another great example. Someone is just way ahead of you
on these tracks,
on these tracks. And so it's like, well, I don't really have a choice anymore, guys. Diamant and Incan Gold, any push your luck game has an element of this, I think, where I think there's just something fun about knowing that you've already screwed up.
Yeah.
And so the only choice you have is to like keep hitting the button.
I wonder why, of the examples you gave, the one where I don't like it is Incan Gold. There's something about Incan Gold where, somebody does really well in the first round of Incan Gold, and for the rest of the game, you have to go for broke. And I don't like. And I think maybe it's because like it's a little bit longer than those games, maybe, and
I think the weighting in Diamant and Incan Gold might be a little off, where like that should only happen like halfway through the game, but it can happen from the very beginning of it.
Yeah. The reason it bugs me is it's sort of like effectively like neuters the decision space of a press your luck, where it's like, okay, I'm not, I don't have a choice.
Yeah, the choice is YOLO. That's the fun. But it's funny because that level of randomness, when we're all in contention for winning, it's completely unacceptable. Like I wouldn't even play the game and wouldn't want to do that. But then somehow when you get behind, it's like, well, I'm already losing. It's time. Yeah. That is how, for me, you make mechanisms that make the losing fun. Because then when I lose more, then I just have to gamble more next turn.
Right.
The other one I sort of had on my list was just this idea that I've spoken about before in roll and write. So like in something like Twice as Clever, where you're making decisions about where to allocate your dice.
Gonchon clever?
Doppelt so clever.
Oh,
God damn it.
Reversal.
Where like you might decide to allocate, a die to a row, and then you suddenly realize this messes me up and I did this to myself. And that always just feels funny to me. I sort of love the hubris of knowing you did something to yourself, basically.
Yeah, I think that that's related to the last thing I had written down as well, which is I think that a lot of modern Euro designs sort of obfuscate when you lost the game. So if you can pinpoint an exact turn or a mistake that you made, early on in the game that you could have done differently, then that makes the losing have some element of knowledge similar to co-ops, where you can go back and say, no, at the beginning of a game of Food Chain Magnate, I must take one of these 2 cards, or I will lose the game. Yeah. When a game makes every action sort of relatively equal, and it's much harder to figure out what has gone wrong, then the losing is perhaps less enjoyable.
Yeah, I get that. Makes sense.
That is going to do it for this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can find us on every form of social media, boardgamebarrage.com. You can join us on our Discord to chit-chat with us all the time. We've had a lot of new visitors and really enjoyed that. That's boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, DISCORD. Please join us and confirm who you think is the half a man. I'm regretting saying this as I'm saying it out loud. We are fastly approaching our 100th episode of the podcast, which is incredible, but we are taking feedback. We're going to be doing some polls and doing some conversations with everyone in the community, whether that's our Patreon backers, who will be sort of spitballing some of the changes that we may make to the show. But if you want to contribute, if you want to let us know your ideas, please join the Discord. Please reach out to us over email. Please reach out to us over Patreon. It is definitely a community project at this point. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And you can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. We do try to read and respond to everything you send us. As always, a huge thank you to Heart Society for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We want to record?
Yep. That's what we're here for.
Is there any net?
Net.
That's what we're here. Do we? Come on.
Oh. Jinx.
What episode is this? 94?
This is 94.
Oh, we
I-
figure out the 100 thing.
I listened to 93.
Yeah.
Oh.
I haven't listened in
You can download.
I haven't listened in a while.
Boring?
Too much Christina. And I had to get that in my whole daily life. Because I think it's funny.
Yeah.
But it's like right on the
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny, Kellen.
Are you f***ing kidding me? Keelan? I'm trying to defend your weak who's unwilling to say the stuff that people want to hear, and you're gonna tell me that I'm funny? All right. Yeah, we probably have to cut that, but could be funny.
Sure.
Um,
Probably not.
well, Neelan did
Okay.
just say that I was funny.
Yeah,
Did you
notably
hear?
I said it back then, and
This is before.
not now, yeah.
Before. That's just stupid. Take it out. Mark,
Cut it.
look me in the eyes. Are you going to cut that?
I'm going to cut it.
Thank God. We don't need her to know. We
I am going to
don't.
include all this, though.
We don't need her to know. She's very lovely.